Great, take it away.
Yeah. All right. So let me go ahead. As I guess everyone here knows, Polish is a Slavic language. It belongs to the West Slavic group of Slavic languages. It's closely related to Czech and Czech and Slovak, even more closely related to Sorbian, which is a minority language in Germany. It is spoken by roughly 40 million people, mostly in Poland, some, diaspora in Russia, Germany, and the likes, even as far as Kazakhstan. And, I guess there are some Polish Americans who feel like they might be able to speak the language, and they are wrong. Just on a side note. As I've written, it's partially mutually intelligible with other West Slavic languages, though obviously it takes some effort, as with mutual intelligibility happens. As a separate language, it has emerged roughly around 10th to 11th century. There are records that back in the early 11th century, it was still completely mutually intelligible with Czech dialects, and that there were no efforts with communication. So that's for a fact. It's been used as a literary language since the 15th century. First literary works in Polish were written down in 13th century. As a fun fact, actually the first book in Polish was lost, and it was found only in the 19th century. And something, was written over it. So it took some restoration to get it back. By the way, I feel like it's a Polish national trait. One of the most famous early sentences in Polish roughly translates to, let other nations know that Polish have not the geese language, but their own. And the geese language in question was Latin. So we tended to make fun of, other nationalities from early Middle Ages, apparently. That's a fun fact. Apropos history, actually the first Polish sentence was written in Hebrew script in 12th century, around the year 1150. It was on a silver coin of a Polish Duke, Mieszko II. As you can see, it was highlighted in Wikipedia. That's not my work here. It roughly translates to Mieszko, King of Poland, which was something of a grandiose statement because he was never crowned. I deliberately put first Slavic inscription in Poland here because there is some historical debate in that. It's argued that it might have been a Slavic-based Jewish language, not unlike Yiddish. But still, first Slavic inscription in Poland was written in Hebrew script, which I feel like is quite interesting. And where is my mouse? Oh, here it is. Now, on to something I am personally more interested about. So we will spend a moment on that Polish. By the way, if anyone has any questions, please do chime in. Polish phonology. It's relatively simple, especially when it comes to vowels. There are only 6 of them. They do not, exactly correspond to the ones, in the standard American pronunciation on the received pronunciation, but I guess they are close enough. So it's a, e, o, u, I. 6 vowels plus 2 nasal vowels, which are their own thing entirely in Polish. For some reason, the nasal O is written as an A with this tiny tail, which is called ogonek in Polish. Nasal E is fortunately written as an E. So they are pronounced respectively on and L. They are not an easy matter. That's why there is an asterisk here. In practice, there are roughly a dozen different ways to actually pronounce it, and they sometimes do disappear in pronunciation. Polish is the only Slavic language to have retained them, actually. So it's a miracle, they are here in the first place, and we shouldn't complain about any troubles with pronunciation. Now, by the way, in red are highlighted sounds that are not present in English. I don't know why this is here. It shouldn't be. It's the maybe should. It's an N sound like the Spanish N with tilde. The R in Polish is trilled. though it's actually most often pronounced as a tap and not a trill, because as you can imagine, it's easier to do a tap than a sound like, like some power tool. Now, another curious aspect of Polish, which it shares with Serbo-Croatian, as Adam has mentioned during his presentation, are the sibilant affricates, which are maybe not unique to Polish, but quite rare. In a way, it's more similar to Mandarin Chinese than, a neighboring language like German. We will get to that a bit later. There is a handful of diphthongs, mostly for the sibilants. So the SZ corresponds to a sh sound. The CZ is pronounced as ch, ch, ch. DZ, z. It's like a voiced Z sound in German or something akin to the Italian Z. I won't go over everything here. The CH sound is now exclusively voiceless. In the past, there was also a voiced H, just written as H now. Both are voiceless, and that's why we have a pair of homophones. Two other pairs of homophones in Polish, the O with a line over it and the regular U are both pronounced the same way. U and RZ plus and the Z with a dot are both pronounced as so a voiced sound. Now, just one exercise. Here in the bottom is a famous Polish tongue twister. If anyone wants to have some fun, quote unquote, tackling this, it's designed as a sort of exercise, because we'll get to some further rules about pronunciation, and I'd really appreciate that if you try to just decipher it using the IPA provided above, and then kind of improve on that transcription using the rules outlined later. Unless obviously you don't want to do that, and I mean, we are in Zoom, it's not like I can strangle you, right? Just by the way, I feel like I can give 2 minutes for that. If there are any questions, meanwhile, I'm happy to answer everything and anything.
I had a question real quick.
Sure.
How similar would you say Polish is to like other Slavic languages? Like, would you be able to understand someone who's speaking Russian with like enough ease?
I'm not the right person to answer the last question, because I do know some Russian, so I'm in a slightly different position. But I'd say in general, yes, Slavic languages in general are way more similar than, for instance, Germanic languages with each other. We have to consider the fact that the Slavic tribes arrived in Europe roughly around the 6th century CE, and they diverged, around the first millennium, basically. So they are, relatively similar. As to, how much you'd understand, I guess, it depends on what foreign languages you speak, because obviously it helps. There are a lot of borrowings from different languages. For instance, the Russian word for orange is apelsin, so from German, or automobile. So obviously borrowed from French. And by the way, a weird example. I mean, the French use voiture for a car, right? Never mind. That was just a tangent. So I'd say you can understand a lot. I feel like if you were stranded, in the middle of another Slavic-speaking country, knowing one language, you could probably get some help. As to how much you'd understand, obviously, it differs from person to person.
Okay, awesome though. Thank you.
All right.
Where's the stress? Where's the stress on these words?
That is a part of the mystery, and we will get to that. I love the stress in Polish. By the way, that's a great question, and I love it, Adam. All right.
I've been trying to write. I've been trying to
Sorry.
write this in IPA, and it's yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Sebrenzenci nie chrzest brzmi what is yeah, it's I don't know, it's very
Yeah.
difficult.
Polish can be a lot at times, but I wouldn't worry about this particular phrase because, tongue twisters tend to work like what? You repeat it, I don't know, half a dozen times and, your tongue starts to twist. In this particular case, Polish people were actually struggling with the pronunciation the first time around. So it's just a wonderful mess of sibilants here. I don't know if I should spend some more time here or if we should just go ahead. Not, I mean, then again, I guess if someone is interested, then you can always, take a screenshot of this particular phrase, and I can get onto the next slide in a sec. All right. So something, we had the phonology here is a bit more practical about something more practical about the pronunciation. First things first, Polish is actually incredibly easy to read, not necessarily to write what you hear, but to read. Sounds tend to correspond one-to-one with what is written. Some things to keep in mind though. Polish, really likes palatalization, and both the sounds represented by the letter J and I palatize preceding consonants. Every single consonant in Polish can be palatized, so you could say it's a soft language in a way. Though there are some exceptions, so the letters C and S, Z, and the diphthong D, Z are not palatalized in a typical way, but instead, Jesus Christ, sorry, but instead turned into sibilants, sibilant affricates. Now, something that is slightly less reasonable in Polish is the fact that the letter I is not always a vowel. Most of the times it actually isn't a vowel, which is very counterintuitive, and we did not have it that way until 1930s. There was a silly reform which replaced the letter J in a variety of situations with I, and it messed things up because now a letter that seems like a vowel isn't necessarily one. So yeah, I usually just palatizes the preceding sound and is not necessarily pronounced as a separate vowel, though in certain cases it is. So we can compare the first word, piosenka, a song, is pronounced exactly that, piosenka, and not piosenka. So there is not a separate vowel following the palatalized P. A contrary example is the word miękki, which means soft, or pun unintended palatal, which is pronounced as miękki. So the K is palatalized and the I pronounced, because otherwise there would be quite a mess. I mean, we'd be looking at 4 consonants, and you cannot really have a consonant cluster of 4 consonants at the end in Polish, so it had to be a separate syllable. Another not particularly phonetic thing is that U is not always pronounced as a vowel U, but in diphthongs AU and EU, it's pronounced as the English W. So the continent Europe in Polish is pronounced not Europa, as the name might, as the spelling might suggest, but Europa. So with a short W and not, a vowel. Similarly, the word for a car, auto, is pronounced with a shorter sound than a full U. By the way, an interesting fact: there is another word, a more popular one for a car in Polish. It's samochód, and it literally means self-goer. we weren't very creative about naming that one. Another thing that slightly complicates things in Polish is the phenomenon of epenthesis. So basically, in when there are two or more vowels side by side, there tends to be another sound inserted. So for instance, the verb kroić, to cut, it's not kroić, because there would be a very unpleasant break without that consonant in the middle. So just a short y sound is inserted between them. So it's pronounced kroić and not kroić. Similarly, nauka, a word for science, actually, an exception to the rule outlined above. I'll explain why. Is pronounced nauka and not nauka. As to why it's pronounced with a U in the first place, because unlike in the case of Europe or a car, there was not a cluster to begin with. It was formed from the verb to learn and a prefix. So that's why there is a vowel still and not affected by the previous rule. Finally, something that is absolutely ubiquitous in Polish: we are lazy people. We do not like voiced consonants. If it can be devoiced, it will be. Basically, if there is a consonant in the end, it gets devoiced. So mózg, the word for brain, it's mózg and not mózg. You'd have to strain yourself really hard to pronounce two voiced vowels in the end, hence the simplified pronunciation. Another word for flower, it's pronounced kwiat and not kwiat. You see, it's just hard to do, so that's why we did that. Another word, a bookmark, is pronounced zakładka and not zakładka. One more thing we like to simplify, the NK and NG clusters. Because actually, I don't know if that would be possible to pronounce in the first place. Maybe it would, but my limited Slavic brain is cannot comprehend that. All right, so let's get to, by the way, if someone is looking at the tongue twister, then this second point might be really useful about palatalization. Just mentioning that. I'll give maybe 15 more seconds and we'll get to another slide. All right, my very favorite subject, sibilants. I love their sounds. It's a matter of a personal preference. They are not arranged in this particular order in IPA, but I feel like this is better because it, in my opinion, shows more closely how the vowel or how the consonants are actually pronounced. So basically, Polish are kind of the Polish sibilants are kind of outliers to the ones present in English. The English ones, so sh, j, ch, j, lie in the middle, whereas Polish, the two ones present in Polish are pronounced a bit harder, quote unquote, and softer. So we can compare that. It's by the way, love doing that. Szyba, shell, śnieg. I don't know if you can quite hear the difference. Szyba, shell, śnieg. Similarly, those are, let's call them S-based. Then the rather Z-based one we have Polish. By the way, szyba means a glass window. Śnieg means snow. Lower we have żaba, pleasure, ziele. Żaba, a frog, ziele, an herb. So it's again a progression. Żaba, pleasure, ziele. Z. Another per, whereas English just have one, as in cherry. In Polish there are two separate cztery, chma, for and moth. So it's cztery, cherry, chma. Actually, it's a great pair because obviously the word for jam in Polish was borrowed from English. So in Polish, it's pronounced jam. In English, well, you know better than I. It's not my native language. I'm bound to mispronounce it, but let's say jam. And you know the final sound in this coupling is dźwięk, Polish for sound. So j, 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 j. One very important question. I always tend to do that. You know, the marker here really matters in certain languages. In Polish, for instance, that's why I am hell-bent on putting it whenever I can, because there is an actual difference. Ch is a question marker. Basically, you know, where a question in German would begin starting with a verb, or you know, in English would start with, you know, das, es, would, etc. In Polish, it just puts a question marker, ch, and it contrasts with the word tr, three. So you can hear, I guess, the difference. Tr, 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 tr. That's why, you know, this hyper sound here matters, because it actually in Polish could change the meaning. It would be hard to differentiate, you know, between those two written down without this dash. Just one final thing about pronunciation, I believe one final, is the stress in Polish language. It's incredibly monotonous. We did not make things harder for ourselves here. Basically, it's almost always on the penultimate syllable. There are some exceptions to that. Polish is a highly inflective language. There are many forms of both verbs and nouns. But you know, if there's inflectional endings add other syllables, you kind of, you know, ignore them. You know, treat them like, you know, enclitics in ancient Greek. Yeah, and just ignore them for purposes of, you know, determining the penultimate syllable. So, for instance, we have the case of this word here, bylibyśmy. That means we would be. It is pronounced with the stress on the first syllable in this case, which, you know, if we ignore the ending, would be the penultimate one, actually. So it's bylibyśmy and not bylibyśmy. Another example, this time a noun, człowiekowi, to a man. It's pronounced exactly that, człowiekowi, and not człowiekowi. Just one quite interesting thing, in my opinion. Actually, the verb endings in certain cases can function as their own. Do not need to be attached to the verb. They can, you know, act as separate words. Another thing about stress in the language, there are certain, you know, certain parts of speech, so prepositions, conjunctions, personal and reflexive pronouns, and the negation particle nie, which corresponds to not or an, can act as enclitics or proclitics. Basically, are not stressed on their own, kind of, you know, lend themselves to the word they are attached to, and are treated as you know, part of that word for the purposes of determining the accent. Just not a true exception in case of words that have a prefix attached to them, as this ex-mąż, ex-husband. You know, the ex, well, I guess, you know, on a more humorous note, the ex part really matters, you know, if it's an ex-husband indeed. But we could argue that, you know, husband, mąż, in this case, is more important, and that's why it's kind of ignored and not looked at all if the word is monosyllabic, so that, you know, it wouldn't be pronounced ex-mąż, but ex-mąż. You know, ex is just a prefix, whereas mąż is a noun, so that's why it's X is ignored. By the way, here I found, among other examples, that you cannot trust Wiktionary with IPA for Polish. There is only one true exception to this rule, that the stress has to be on the penultimate syllables, and those are words borrowing from Greek ending in ika or ika. So basically all scientific disciplines, it's matematica, fisica, informatica, linguistica, so mathematics, linguistics, and so on. It's all on the antepenultimate knot, and not not on the penultimate syllable, unless you obviously want to sound like a rural idiot, in which case you're welcome to do whatever you want to do. Just the answer to the question, if anyone was following, as you can see, it's a hot mess. Polish can be a hot mess, and this sentence, this tongue twister, is a great example. By the way, the town of Szczebrzeszyn is real. Well, I sympathize with whoever lives there. So it reads as w Szczebrzeszynie chrząszcz brzmi w trzcinie, and this beautiful sentence means a beetle is making noises in reeds in the town of Szczebrzeszyn. Not one you would probably need to use in real life, but one a Polish person might want you to repeat because it's fairly well known. So just one more time for statistic purposes. W Szczebrzeszynie chrząszcz brzmi w trzcinie. Okay, now on to some grammar stuff. Polish, it could be argued today that there are only two proper tenses in Polish, past and non-past, because they have their own separate forms there, as we will see in a while. We add suffixes on top of everything. But generally in Polish, in Polish, language studies, it's generally assumed that there are three tenses. Plus, there are some pluperfect forms that survive in certain verbs, though very rarely. And it can be, occasionally used if you are a pretentious author and you want to make your characters sound more antiquated. So there is that. In general, three grammatical cases, three persons in singular and plural. So the standard stuff with one minor difference. Obviously English has he, she, it. So does Polish. Whereas English has only they in plural. We also divide it by gender. So there is a masculine they and a feminine they. As I mentioned, two numbers, singular and plural, three moods with different grammatical forms. Indicative mood, is the standard one. Someone is doing something, he paints, on maluje. She swims, ona pływa, just indicating an action. Imperative, just for making orders. Conditional, pretty much self-explanatory. Also, imperative, obviously despite the name, for any polite questions. If you ask someone for something, it's still imperative. Three voices: active, passive, and reflexive. Reflexive is something of a stretch. It's formed just by adding a reflexive pronoun, się, on top of the verb. Now, five genders. I guess, any conservatives might start, scratching their heads as to why there are five genders. But yeah, there are three in singular: masculine, feminine, and neuter. And for those conservatives among us, fortunately, there is some sexism in plural, because, verbs are divided, have masculine and non-masculine forms. Another feature unique to Polish is aspects, whereas English has, perfect and progressive tenses, Polish doesn't, but we have aspects instead, and they indicate, just kind of like in English, whether an action was completed or was just occurring at a given time. Okay, on to another slide. It's just, some scary Wiktionary screenshots showing the number of forms, though as we will see in a while, it's actually not that difficult, though exceptions apply. So as we can see, there are different forms for the present and past tense. The future tense is formed with, by the way, we are now talking on the left side about imperfective aspect. In imperfective aspect, future tense is formed just by adding the conjugated verb to be in a form of past tense, which is kind of weird when you think about it, that you use a past participle for a future tense. There are also impersonal forms which are kind of difficult to translate into English. Conditional mood, imperative mood, those were all indicative forms. And finally, there is a lot of participles that can be formed in Polish. Those are basically, those three basically mean eating, the three below being eaten. So it's just, it looks more daunting than it really is, because, as you can see, grammatical gender results in a multiplication of all of those forms. You can also form verbal nouns. And here, on the right, it's basically the same deal, just with the perfective aspect of the verb. So you could argue that those are two separate verbs. You could argue those are two aspects. Polish linguists tend to favor the latter approach. All right. Now, just to show, it's not actually that bad. Polish is not a language designed by masochists, but just a language, so there is some rhyme and reason to it. There are only 4 conjugations in indicative present tense. And as you can see, they are not all that different. The 2 below are basically the same thing. The 2 above differ slightly, though, as you can also see, the differences are not terrible. For instance, between ty piszesz, you write, and ty płacisz, you pay. The difference, obviously, except from the verb itself, is just that this one has e, this one has a. So those forms are very similar. Things get even easier in the past tense because there is only one past conjugation. Everything looks the same, though unfortunately there is a catch. There is always a catch. There are alterations. Fortunately, the verbs I've chosen here only have one, which is just an addition of a z in conjugation, but there can be quite a lot of those. So that's the only thing basically that complicates Polish conjugation. I didn't want to get into that too much because it's not really necessary and doesn't show anything. But as you can see, these forms are fairly regular. The third person is kind of assumed like the base one, and just stuff is added on top of that. By the way, I don't know if I've mentioned that nasal vowels are sometimes divorced. So in practice, there is no difference in pronunciation here between the first and third person. If we look at the verb pływać, to swim, we can see that the third person here is actually kind of the entire stem of the word, and we just add stuff on top of that. M for the first person, sh for the second person singular, and my, che, ją in plural for the first, second, and third person. All right, now I have a small exercise. I will not tell you which conjugation it is, but you can make a guess. You can make 2 guesses. One will be wrong, one won't. But yeah, please try to conjugate that in indicative and in the past indicative. If you don't want to figure out which present conjugation that is, you can just go with the past one, because there is no change at all. By the way, the verb I'm asking you to conjugate, grać, means to play. By the way, meanwhile, if there are any questions, please go ahead. If there are none, well, then I'll be staring in one of my screens, I guess.
Which tense did you want us to conjugate?
You can do both if you can figure out which. I guess you cannot figure it out because it could plausibly be either 1 or 3a. But yeah, I mean you speak Croatian, so I guess you could easily, right? But yeah, the second one should be less difficult because, as I've mentioned, there is only one conjugation in the past tense, past indicative. So yeah.
Yeah, so in the past, я грачем, ти грачеш, он грачал, ми грачисму, the grazie, on oni grachly. I probably messed that up somewhere, but how bad was it?
Honestly, it wasn't that bad, but let's give everyone a chance. Their answers in the next slide. Yeah. All right, I don't know if anyone is still doing that or if I should go to the answers. So let me know. Okay, it's nothing a no or a yes, I don't know. We can go to the answers though, I guess, unless
We're probably good to move on.
Yeah. So just to clarify, that ch here was the ending, gra is the stem. So following the rules from it's, by the way, this 3a conjugation here. We just add m as z, m y c i e, j, well, on to the stem gra, and we get gram, grash, gra, grame, grace, graio. For the second, for the past one, I've realized before I made the presentation, we are just having the masculine forms here because otherwise we would get 3 times what we signed up for. So yeah, I just highlighted it in this yellowish color because that L with a line L is added in conjugation, even though it doesn't appear in the indicative form itself. So ja grałem, ty grałeś, on grał, my graliśmy, wy graliście, oni grali. All right, let's get sorry. I have just some fun facts here because I felt like there was things in chat. Yeah, just some fun facts because I felt like I might have gone over the grammar. The negative particle in Polish is generally considered to be a part of the verb because it can change the case following the verb. So by the way, I don't know why English doesn't have a nice term for Reaktion der Verben. That's a real shame. The best I could find is case government. Either way, the example here, to have something to have in Polish is mieć, and it is normally followed by the accusative case. Nie mieć, to not have, is followed by genitive on the other hand. So as you can see, mam pieniądze means I have money, nie mam pieniędzy. The ending changed from E to Y, and the case changed from accusative to genitive. Just one thing that's here in the brackets, Polish, just like Russian. I don't know. Adam can chime in and tell us if that's also the case in Serbo Croatian. Is generally pro drop. If you can drop the past, please feel free to do so. Similarly with the verb to be. Adam, does Serbo Croatian also do that, or is it just a Russian thing more?
No, I don't think we do.
Huh.
But also, I'm notoriously bad at some grammatical rules in Serbian, so I could be wrong.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, I guess we are just lazy. We really do not like, explicit subjects. It's all left, to infer from the verb. We've seen the conjugation. It's all the information you need. It cannot be any other form than the first person singular indicative. So no really need to write the personal pronoun. Okay.
I just checked, and Serbian does in fact do that.
That's
Yes.
a nice, Slavic thing in common. Another, curious feature of Polish are the frequentative, verbs, which indicate that an action occurs occasionally, that an action occurs sometimes, and they are formed with various interfixes, which, I feel like, interfixes in general are a rare feature, and in the European languages, you tend to have prefixes or suffixes. Here, just they slam something in between. There is this example here: peach, to drink; pijać, to drink occasionally. Pijam piwo, I sometimes drink beer, whereas, piję piwo would mean I am drinking beer. Another example: mieć, to have; miewać, to have occasionally. By the way, this sentence here was inspired by the fact that PowerPoint was changing my language to Polish all the time, and I was struggling with, everything in English being, underlined in red. By the way, never mind. Miewam problemy z Office'em. I sometimes have difficulties with Microsoft Office. By the way, here, the interfix was JA, ja. Here it was WA, which I guess is the most common VA. Another example here is the interfix is YW, if. So we have pisać, to write; pisywać, to write occasionally. Pisuję dla magazynów popularno-naukowych. I occasionally write for popular science magazines. All right. I slapped that before. Okay, we haven't gone over the noun. I've forgotten, I've changed the order of my slideshow. Okay, nouns are a hot mess in Polish. Verbs are tame, nouns are not. First, 3 genders in singular, which I guess is fairly standard. With, one important caveat: masculine nouns, with masculine gender are further divided into, personal, animate, and inanimate, and depending on which type they are. And it doesn't always correspond to nature. The declension differs. In plural, there are only, as I've mentioned, sexes to genders, masculine, which is explicitly for things that, are biologically masculine, and non-masculine for everything else. Now, Polish only has 2 grammatical numbers now, singular and plural. It used to have until the 17th century also the dual number. It disappeared in most of the cases, though there are, some remnants of it. As I've put it here, basically, most of the things, that you have 2 of in your body still use, the old dual form, and, the plural one just disappeared. So, for instance, I is oko in Polish, and the former dual, which is now plural, is oczy. Normally, it should be oka. Similarly, an ear is ucho. The plural now, which used to be dual, is uszy, whereas normally it would be ucha. Arm, ręka. Again, the old dual, now plural, ręce, normally should be ręki. Funnily enough, if you have some fat floating, on the surface of soup, it's also called an oko in Polish. Oko tłuszczu, literally an eye of fat. And the plural of that is actually not oczy, but oka. Similarly, when you have an ear of a jug, the handle, the plural is not uszy, but ucha. So basically, the former dual forms only replaced, the plurals in one meaning of the words. And there is only one remaining word in Polish that kind of has all three forms, and that is 100, 100, which is kind of understandable. I mean, you wouldn't change the word for 200 or 300 and so on, right? So it's 100, 100, and 100. And it remains, in 100, 100, 200, 200, 300, 300. Now, there are 7 grammatical cases. We will get onto a bit later, and 17 types of declension based on those genders before and some other factors, and it's a mess, as I mentioned. So we are not really getting into that. I'll just show you how it looks. Just a couple of cases blatantly ripped off Wiktionary. As you can see, some forms can be the same. It's usually either nominative and accusative, or nominative and genitive, or nominative and vocative, or genitive and accusative. Also, another thing you can notice, klub is obviously a borrowing, and yet it did not preclude us from applying our silly grammar on top of it. So, something being a loan word doesn't make things any different. Even, good old George Washington wasn't spared because, we cruelly decline his name, sorry. So if you wanted to do that in Polish, it would be Jerzy Waszyngton, Jerzemu Waszyngtonowi, Jerzego Waszyngtona, Jerzy Waszyngtonem, Jerzemu Waszyngtonowi, Jerzy Waszyngtonie. Even, the first president himself. We are cruel people. Also, not just nouns decline, it also happens to adjectives, in certain cases, also numerals. Just to show it here, we won't be going over it. Fortunately, adjectives have fewer forms. All right. Now, something really interesting. My favorite fact. Most language, not most, but there is a lot of languages with some levels of formality. I know that Korean has a highly developed system of that. Polish does too. Unlike French, Spanish, or Russian, we don't use the second person plural. Instead, we use the third person singular, and we honestly do that to an excess. You literally cannot, basically address another person, you don't know closely, who isn't, your peer, using the second person. That's considered incredibly impolite. That's, slap someone in the face level of impolite. Honestly, I guess people would be less offended if you slap them in the face than, if you use second person towards them. So that's really weird. And another weird thing is, those forms literally, translate to lord and lady. That's because, before Poland lost its independence in 1795, like 1 in 10 people were nobles, and, they kept addressing themselves as that. So it's stuck. Basically the peasants liked it and adapted it for the purposes. So some examples. Czy źle pan się czuje? Does Lord feel unwell, literally? Czy potrzebuje pani pomocy? Does lady need help? As you can see, even the verbs are third person. It's not just, that we are using this honorific title, but the verbs are also in the third person. And also, when you are being impolite towards someone, you would still use those forms of address. This wonderful example here, pan jest idiotą, Lord is an idiot. If you wanted to be, a real asshole, you could actually, use the second person form of to be. But, telling someone pan jesteś idiotą would be, calling him a motherfucker in English, and and kicking them in the butt. So that's not something you want to do. And just one form that fortunately is going the way of Dodo, and apart from some overzealous clerk, in municipal offices, no one is using it in real life, is the question pańska godność. It literally means your lordship's dignity, and that's just a question for one's name. By the way, one of my colleagues, back in high school, had a very weird situation. He didn't know what that means, and he was just gaping, at the lady in the office. And you can imagine the situation. Someone is literally just saying to you, your lordship's dignity, and you are, there's just this dissonance. It makes it all the sillier, I guess. All right. Another, just funny feature, in my opinion, I wanted to bring up, most normal languages use nominative when, something for this to be. So in Latin, it's homosom, in French, je suis un homme, ich bin ein Mensch. I'm joking here. Obviously, there is nominative, but, it's not like English has grammatical cases. In Russian, я человек. And even though, Russian is also a Slavic language, it doesn't do what Polish does. We, for some reason, don't use nominative. So normally, if we follow that, that to be jestem, I am, by nominative, it would be jestem człowiek. We did not do that. We use our own invented case for that, the instrumental case. Why? No idea whatsoever, but that's just what we do. And just one short slide at the end is just, some borrowings from Russian. On this hill, I will die. You can argue, okay, but vodka is a Slavic thing, Russia, bullshit. Vodka was, the word itself was first recorded in Poland. So in an act of linguistic nationalism, I am claiming the word for our language. Whatever the origin, it is a diminutive form of voda, water. Another word with a quite a convoluted etymology is gherkin. It's originally from Greek. It was borrowed into Polish as ogórek, then borrowed by German, and then from German it arrived in English. Another word, yarmulke, unless you want to call it a kippah, which it obviously isn't a borrowing. Yarmulke comes from a Turkic language. Which one? It's unclear, but it was borrowed via Polish, just like quite a lot of other Yiddish words with, a huge Yiddish-speaking population in former Polish territories. There was a lot of cultural transfer. And another word, spruce, likely comes from Polish sprut, from Prussia. Prussia, obviously everyone thinks of Prussia as Germany, but another act of nationalism, this time not linguistic. Prussia first was, until the 18th century divided between Poland and Prussia, and until 17th century it was a Polish vassal, and we screwed that up 3 times with those folks, and then they, well, took advantage of Poland being in the place it is. All right, that is the end of my presentation. I hope I wasn't too incoherent and that the stuff wasn't too boring. If there are any questions at the end, feel free to ask.
That was really interesting. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really like the phonology. Like, you have such a rich like sound system. Yeah, it's fascinating that like you what, like 8, 9 different types of sibilants. That's really cool. Yeah. So not really a question, just a comment.
Nice to hear that. Honestly, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that honestly, I cannot understand how people can possibly differentiate between the 2 sounds present, types of sounds present in Serbo-Croatian. I mean, I know Polish people trying to learn English don't hear the difference between like Polish sh and English sh. Personally, I only found this year that actually German doesn't have the same sound as Polish, which came to me as a huge surprise. I didn't just notice that because I didn't know there was a difference, so I didn't hear it. Now that I know there is, obviously I start noticing it everywhere. But yeah, honestly, that's to me absolutely amazing and weird in a way.
If nobody else has questions, I just want to jump in quickly to say that next meeting is our last one for this semester. And we're trying to figure out what to do for that meeting. So we could either bring back Adam Hesterberg to talk about some more topics. We could show off some conlangs that our members have made or do another language presentation like this. So if you guys have any thoughts on this, cast a vote and then all right. Sounds like Conlang Showcase already won. Great. We'll try to set that up then. Cool. Yeah. Thanks so much, Zach. That was really fun.
Oh yeah, no, bro. No trouble whatsoever. I love that. If there are things I can talk about, it's Polish and it's making fun of Polish Americans too. Honestly, I only regret not being able to mock them in a more direct way. But honestly, I guess it's with all languages. But hearing Polish pronounced wrong, just the words are there. It's just English sound. So I guess there is a difference. You've heard some Polish. There is a difference between that and if I now try to say something like. No wiesz, że tak próbowałem troszkę mówić po polsku, to tak teraz to troszkę brzmi bardziej amerykańsko, nie? Tak, I don't know if you can hear the sounds, but it's closer to I guess American English than Oh, but that is the most important word there is, Craig. You can go very far with that. Yeah, on a more serious note, I wanted to include that, but it would be a bit too profane. Like the literal translation of fuck in Polish is either pierdolić or jebać, and you can literally fill an entire dictionary with forms of. Basically, with pierdolić, you can form every different verb that there is, with different prefixes. So, for instance, napierdolić się means to get fucking drunk. Przypierdolić się. Do kogoś, have trouble with someone and kind of complain to them about it. Opierdalać się, be fucking lazy. You can do a lot of things with Polish, jebać and pierdolić that you cannot do with English fuck, and that is the superiority of Slavic languages or not. Depends on your point of view. Okay, I guess it's what? I'm bad at time zones. At 1 a.m. here, it's what?
Yeah, we just hit 7 Eastern.
Thank you for that.
A well-timed presentation.
Yeah, I cannot do math this late. All right, thanks. Thanks for bearing with me. Thanks for having me. Yeah, and see you next week, I guess.